Falter-Podcasts werden durch Werbung unterstützt. Das hilft bei der Finanzierung unseres journalistischen Angebots. Falter-Radio, der Podcast mit Raimund Löw.
Sehr herzlich willkommen, meine Damen und Herren, im Falter-Radio. In der folgenden Sendung hören Sie Ukrainerinnen und Ukrainer, die 1,5 Jahre nach Putins Angriff über die Folgen des Krieges und die Widerstandskraft ihrer Gesellschaft sprechen. Die Filmemacherin Horlowa und die Übersetzerin Kirijenko geben Einblick in ihr Engagement. Dazu gibt es Einschätzungen des Politikwissenschaftlers Krastev und des österreichischen Botschafters in Kiew, Arad Benkö. Die Sozialwissenschaftlerinnen K.Younger und Shynkarenko beschreiben den Plan des Wiener Instituts für die Wissenschaften von Menschen mit dem Projekt Documenting Ukraine, eine umfassende Chronik des ukrainischen Widerstands zu erstellen. Politikwissenschaftler Krastev kommt aus Bulgarien und ist ein Beobachter der weltweiten Auseinandersetzungen um Geopolitik und Demokratie. Ich treffe ihn Ende Juni am Rand eines Buchfestivals namens Arsenal Book Festival, das Krastev das erste Mal seit längerem wieder in die Hauptstadt der Ukraine geführt hat. Was ihn bei seinem Besuch in Kiew Ende Juni besonders frappiert, ist der Kontrast zwischen dem Schein der Normalität und der Realität eines grausamen Krieges.
One of the things is this coexistence between this meeting sense of normalcy that you see on the street. If you basically come from Moon and you don't know where you're coming to a book fair and you have this absolutely incredible people and most of them are smiling and so on. And then discovering that many of these people are coming from the front and going back to the front. What made the most strongest impression on me is that it's a self-reflective society. They know that something important is happening to them. They're trying to make sense of what is happening to them. They start to think about them as having a special role to play in the world today because of their unique experience, not because of their unique geography. And of course, this creates you this intensity of meaning, which is normally absent.
Die Extremsituation, die der Politikwissenschaftler Krastev analysiert, erlebt die Übersetzerin Kirijenko seit Kriegsbeginn Tag für Tag. Frau Kirijenkos Ehemann leistet Sanitätsdienst an der Front. Sie selbst war in der Nacht vor unserem Gespräch im Luftschutzkeller ihres Hauses.
Night, so I heard a red alarm. I read the information from our air defense that missiles are already flying. So I took my backpack and I went there. And afterwards, my brother with 3 children and his wife came as well. So we waited about an hour, and then they canceled the air raid alarm, and we returned to our beds.
Must be pretty difficult for your brother with the kids.
Yes, because 2 of them are teenagers, so it's easier. But one of them is 8 years old, so he is sleepy, and he doesn't want to go up and go somewhere at night, of course.
I mean, how often does that happen, that you have to wake up at night and go to the shelter?
Those last 3 months, 2 months, I think it was every 2 days. So during the day, but mostly at night. It is difficult, but you cannot sleep, and then after the next day you have to go to work or to school. So it's exhausting.
Dass das Straßenbild von Kiew von außen gesehen so normal erscheint, ist für Kirijenko ein Fortschritt gegenüber früher.
Yes, it's true. Sometimes foreign people have this impression, and in my opinion, it means that our army does their job very well. That there is no war in Kiev, because 1 year ago it was not the fact. So it means that the front line is pushed away from our country, and a majority of people can have a normal life. That's why they are fighting for the normal, peaceful life. But of course, when you have curfew, air raid alarms, even destruction. Very quickly, you don't see it. It doesn't seem like a peaceful city. And if you go near military hospitals or like refugee centers, you will see that it's not what it seems. But a lot of soldiers coming to Kiev for a couple days of vacation, they see it and they tell that it's perfect, that it's peaceful. It means that we did our job very well and we pushed the war from most of the cities.
Die Situation an der Front, wo gekämpft wird und gestorben wird, beschreibt die Filmemacherin Alina Horlowa. Die junge Frau macht Dokumentarfilme und bereitet mit anderen eine Trilogie vor, die den Arbeitstitel Die Tage, die du vergessen willst, trägt. Sie war zuletzt in der Stadt Cherson im Süden. Cherson ist nach Monaten der russischen Besatzung von den Ukrainern zurückerobert worden, liegt aber unter russischem Artilleriebeschuss.
Tell about Kherson. It was occupied and they spent under occupation around 6 months. And after we liberated this city, finally, the Russians, they started to bomb this city, unfortunately. It's not rocket attacks, when you could hear red alert and you could be prepared. Unfortunately, from another bank of the river, Russians could reach the city by artillery. So that's the problem.
What does it mean if you drive around?
It means that you could die anytime, anywhere, and you, after some time, you are realized that you are going through the street through the street, and finally you understand that you could be killed right here, and this period of occupation, of the pressure of repressions and tortures, and they prisoned a lot of people, and they still in their captivity. People, you could feel it in the society. There are not so much people there, but anyway, you could feel this something like a depression.
Alina Horlowa hat in Kherson gerade gefilmt.
Part of the city of Kherson was flooded, and it was also again like some very big stress, and we realized that we were filming there, and these volunteers on the boats, and it was like another catastrophe, and people tried to rescue people, animals, and everything happened under the shellings, under the bombs. So it was another factor. So I think it influenced a lot of people there, and it influenced you, because after 3 days and 4 days, I realized that I don't mind that shellings is going on and bombings and sounds. I just was already okay with it in some way.
Wie sie die Stimmung unter den Soldaten an der Front erlebt, will ich von der Filmemacherin Alina Horlowa wissen.
People are tired. Soldiers. They're really tired because mostly they didn't have any normal vacations, some rest. It could be, but several days in 3 or 6 months, it's not enough. The intensity of this war, it's absolutely incredible high. And somebody could be depressive, and they could say we are here in the army in this war until we die. So they say that it's not so easy to fight with Russians because it's only in propaganda they're so very silly. They are not so silly. But at the same time, I really met cool guys who are just very patriotic. They just accept everything, and they feel very good, and mostly it's younger guys. I met some guys, they're working with artillery, and they're 20, 25 years old, and they're absolutely okay. They're just, they shoot from this artillery, and then they coming back to the shelter and playing in the phone games or looking Insta reels, something like that, and they're absolutely okay, and they're laughing, and yeah. So it depends very much, and of course you could see in the front line fear, how we are filming, in stabilization point. And this is where from the front line, medics, they evacuate people who are damaged, and in this stabilization point, it's really near the front line, so they stabilize their state, not healing, but to do everything to make these people not dead.
Ängste und Sorgen an der Front will Filmemacherin Horlowa in ihrer Dokumentation zeigen, genauso wie das Bewusstsein der Soldaten, dass ihr Kampf für die ganze Nation lebenswichtig ist. Horlowa führt uns nach Butscha, eine Stadt 30 Kilometer nordöstlich von Kiew, die zum Symbol der Grausamkeit der russischen Besatzung geworden ist. Als die Besatzer nach mehreren Wochen abzogen, hinterließen sie ein Massengrab, in dem 100 zivile Opfer begraben waren. Um die Bevölkerung zu terrorisieren, hatte man die Toten tagelang auf der Straße liegen lassen. Stadtarchivar I.Bartkiv führt uns hinter die Kirche von Butscha, wo die Massengräber gelegen sind. Die Filmemacherin Horlowa übersetzt.
67 чоловік. Тобто це було 57 цивільних і 10 військових.
9 числа.
10-го.
10. Yeah, so as you have seen the situation, the Associated Press showed that people are laying on the street. As I understood, this situation was in different districts of Butscha. And they tried to collect all these dead persons, and around 9 of March, they buried them. But for some districts, they couldn't reach, because я правильно розумію, що пересування по місту було важке? Тобто...
Ну, не те, що важке, воно було небезпечне. Чесно кажучи, так невеличкі квартали можна було пройти, бо були їхні блокпости, стояв там БТР або якась техніка на перехресті, і вони контролювали, тобто вулицю, трасу, можна було перейти, але можна було отримати кулю.
It was very dangerous to move through the city when the Russians were here, and because they organized a lot of checkpoints, and they check all people, and sometimes you couldn't from one district go to another sometimes. And of course you could try, but they could shot you. And as I understand it, that's what happened with all these people.
Das Massaker von Butscha, das Stadtarchivar I.Bartkiv beschreibt, hat schlagartig bewusst gemacht, dass es beim russischen Krieg gegen die Ukraine nicht um einen Streit über Territorium geht, sondern um das Überleben der Ukraine als Nation. Ist die Ukraine in Putins Weltsicht doch Teil Russlands? Das Symbol für Widerstandswille und Nationalbewusstsein in der Ukraine ist der Maidan, der große Platz im Zentrum von Kiew, an dem 2014 Tausende wochenlang unter blauen EU-Fahnen und blau-gelben ukrainischen Fahnen gegen den moskauerigen Präsidenten Janukowitsch demonstriert haben. Janukowitsch blockierte ein Abkommen der Ukraine zur Verbindung mit der Europäischen Union. Die Sonderpolizei eröffnete das Feuer und es gab über 100 Tote. Das Massaker am Maidanplatz löste einen Volksaufstand aus und der Putin-hörige Präsident floh nach Russland. Die Annexion der Krim und der verdeckte russische Einmarsch in der Ostukraine waren die Reaktionen des Kreml. Die Übersetzerin Kirijenko führt mich über die Treppe mit den Fotos der Gefallenen. Jede Revolution hat ihre Märtyrer. Die Opfer des Maidan werden himmlische 100 genannt in der Ukraine. Sie gehören zur Identität der neuen Nation. 2014 war Kirijenko fast jeden Tag selbst unter den Demonstranten.
It's a symbol of that our people will not accept dictators, and we are ready to die for our freedom, and that's the thing that Putin doesn't understand, that if we are ready to die for our freedom, it's the most precious thing for us. So when we chased our dictator during this Maidan revolution, and people were ready to die, just to get this freedom and not to be like in country prison. So for us, it's a symbol that we have to honor their memory, and we have to fight and not to lose this freedom.
Ob ein Waffenstillstand und ein territorialer Kompromiss mit Russland für sie denkbar ist, damit das Leiden aufhört, frage ich die Übersetzerin und Aktivistin Kirijenko.
I think 90% of our society will not accept the ceasefire and will not accept any compromise, because we paid the highest price, and now we don't want to compromise with the invaders and terrorists, so we will continue to fight. And I think our society will not accept compromise, because for us, our opinion is that the Russian occupation is much more worse than the war. Maybe it sounds, for some people, it will not sound like logical, but we know the history. We have a real history of relationship with Russia, so we know that their occupation will bring more dead people and more sufferings than this war brings.
Im ukrainischen Verteidigungskampf erlebt Europa heute den Nationalismus eines unterdrückten Volkes, das sich gegen den Angriff des Imperiums wehrt, das hier lange Zeit geherrscht hat. Politikwissenschaftler sprechen von einem nationalen Befreiungskrieg gegen das russische Imperium, vergleichbar mit den Unabhängigkeitsbewegungen in Afrika und anderen Teilen des globalen Südens gegen frühere Kolonialherren. Krastev, der bulgarische Denker und Politikwissenschaftler, spricht von einem schwer aufzulösenden Widerspruch zwischen dem aufstrebenden ukrainischen Nationalismus und der Identität der Europäischen Union, die sich selbst ja als postnationales Projekt versteht.
This is also going to be part of the problem that Europe is facing as a whole, because European project was very much based on post-nationalism. And during the Yugoslav wars, Europe basically defined itself in opposition to nationalism. Nationalism cannot be good. Neither Croatian, nor Serbian, or Bosniaks. And then comes this type of a war in which Ukrainians' defensive nationalism is the reasons they're resistant, that they're resilient, that they're ready to die, and they're defending their freedom. So how Europe is reconciling its post-national ethos with Ukrainian nationalism. And we're reconciling this in a very special way. We say we're nationalists in the way that we are all Ukrainian nationalists.
Wie gefährlich ist es nach Meinung Krastevs, dass sich die Ukrainer in ihrem Verteidigungskampf häufig auch von Russlands Kultur abschotten und nicht nur Putin und die russische Führung als ihre Feinde sehen?
Listen, I went to a bookstore, and I had been, of course, in Kiev before the war. And before 2022, and you go to the bookstore, particularly before 2014, and you're going to see half of the books have been in Russian. Now there is no Russian books there. The biggest risk in every war is to start resembling your enemy. And this is something that Clausewitz basically had discovered, that nothing is more imitatable than the war. So from this point of view, President Putin started this war trying to create the world without Ukraine and without Ukrainians, killing people in order to confess that they're Russians. And then the idea to try to imagine basically the world totally in absence of Russian language or Russians, this is a risk. And this is a risk because they're different Russians. There are Russians who are killing, and there are Russians who are torturing, but there are Russians who make the very difficult moral choice to oppose their own government in a time of war. And this is very important. And in my view, what we cannot allow is ethnization difference.
They are not represented here. Isn't that something that's missing? I mean, there are smart people here, people with an international outlook, but there are no Russian anti-war people represented here. Isn't that a problem?
It is a problem. But listen, to be absolutely honest, I have a much more tolerance for Ukrainians not inviting Russians here than for the Western debates in which we are basically not inviting Russians. And I'm going to tell you why. Exactly because they have been living for a long time together, they have been sharing culture and others. The feeling of betrayal is very strong. It's one thing to be killed by somebody that you barely know. It's totally different to kill when some of your relatives are living in Russia and so on. So this sense of betrayal, push for this separation, I do believe it's transitory. I don't believe that it should go, but unfortunately nation states have been starting like this and around, and basically how they're referring. So here is the role for Europeans, much more for anybody else. At the same time, we should try basically to say, we understand this as a momentum, but this is not the future.
Ivan Krastev ist mit seinen Analysen eine prominente Stimme des Instituts für die Wissenschaften vom Menschen in Wien. Vor 40 Jahren ist das Institut als Plattform des Dialogs zwischen Intellektuellen in Osteuropa und dem Westen gegründet worden. Inzwischen steht die Entwicklung der Ukraine im Zentrum des Engagements. Unter dem Titel Documenting Ukraine entsteht unter der Obhut des Instituts für die Wissenschaften vom Menschen eine Chronik der ukrainischen Ereignisse. K.Younger ist die wissenschaftliche Leiterin. Sie hat den Falter Ende Juni zu der Erkundungsreise geladen. Wir sprechen auf der Zugsfahrt von Wien nach Kiew.
Our idea with documenting Ukraine is that in a war that encompasses every aspect of Ukrainian life, Russian aggression has affected every single facet of life. We need to use all the means at our disposal to chronicle what is happening. So at IWM, we launched Documenting Ukraine specifically to support Ukrainian professionals in many different fields. These can be academics, they can be historians, they can be literary scholars, they can be ecologists, but they can also be journalists, artists, librarians, archivists. And all of them use their professional expertise and perspective to capture what's happening, whether that's in terms of producing documentation, right, in a traditional classic form, interviews, data sets, those sorts of things, but also reflecting on what's happening, whether through art or through film or other ways.
With how many people are you in contact in that way in the framework of documenting Ukraine?
As of now, so in the summer of 2023, we're working with over 250 partners in Ukraine. These are organizations or individuals who are located in 20 of Ukraine's regions, so really across the country, as well as some projects that are abroad. And they're capturing really every facet of what's happening.
And concretely, what would they do? Give us an example of a place, a prominent place like Lviv, for instance. What would people in Lviv do in the framework of documenting Ukraine?
So, for example, we're working with many oral historians. We're working with a project, for example, called After Silence, which before the full-scale invasion really dealt with oral testimonies from people who had survived episodes of mass violence and repression in the 20th century, And so then they took this expertise, and when the full-scale invasion began, refugees, internally displaced people became arriving in Lviv. They both helped people get settled in this new environment while also recording their stories.
Ein ganzer akademischer Forschungszweig rund um die Ukraine baut sich im Institut für die Wissenschaften vom Menschen gerade auf, berichtet auf der Zugsfahrt nach Kiew die wissenschaftliche Mitarbeiterin Mascha Shynkarenko, die selbst aus der Ukraine kommt.
That people want to study Ukraine, different aspects of Ukraine, starting from Ukrainian literature, political aspects of the Russian colonization, and how do we think about the current war from that historical perspective and those analytical lenses. So a lot of post-colonial scholarship is emerging.
Das besondere Forschungsinteresse bei Mascha Shynkarenko gilt den Krim-Tataren, die seit der russischen Annexion der Krim besonderer Repression ausgesetzt sind. Für ihre Recherchen war die Sozialwissenschaftlerin wiederholt auch selbst auf die Krim gereist.
By the time I managed to go to Crimea in 2020, the people who stayed, they have already lived through the worst periods of the Russian occupation. Many families have or know someone who has been detained by Russia. I would say that the whole Crimean Tatar community is affected by the Russian authoritarian regime. Lots of people are charged with the terrorist, extremist accusations. And one of the women that I interview, she has 3 children, and her husband was taken in one of the raids, and he recently received 20 years in prison. Lots of people are constantly in this state where they anticipate that something like this can happen. There is constantly raids at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning when they come and try to intimidate the family and usually they take away men. They take them to prison and they charge them with extremism or terrorism, and they send them to Russia to serve their sentences in the Russian prisons. There are whole villages where only women live.
The people you talk to, did they speak freely to you, or was that difficult?
So they are very, very careful to who they talk to. The general mood in Crimea is thus that you won't even talk to your neighbor, because usually it is the neighbors who tell the police or
Spy on you,
yes.
Die Republik Österreich hat in Kiew keinen leichten Stand. Waffenlieferungen, die das Land dringend braucht, gibt es keine. Auch politisch gehört Österreich innerhalb der Europäischen Union nicht zu den Staaten, die einem möglichen EU-Beitritt der Ukraine besonders offen gegenüberstehen. Beim Arsenal-Buchfestival in Kiew gibt Präsident Volodymyr Zelensky eine auf Österreich bezogen verhaltene Antwort auf meine Frage nach der Solidarität der Europäer.
I can only to be thankful for European society, just for ordinary people.
Ich kann nur sagen, ich bin der europäischen Gesellschaft dankbar. Sie wissen, was Ihre Regierung tun kann und in welche Richtung sie etwas langsam geht. Wir dürfen vor Russland keine Angst haben.
We have not to be afraid of Russia. It's my recommendation.
Das Bemühen der österreichischen Bundesregierung, sich mit dem Argument Neutralität aus der Idee einer Sicherheitsgarantie der EU für Europa herauszunehmen, löst manches Kopfschütteln aus. Bemerkenswert ist die breite humanitäre Hilfe, die aus Österreich geliefert wird. Der österreichische Botschafter in Kiew, Arad Benkö, wirbt für Österreich und in Österreich für ukrainische humanitäre Projekte. Darunter befindet sich ein Rehabilitationszentrum für Kriegsversehrte, das in Lemberg vom österreichischen Honorarkonsul in Odessa Andrei Stavitzer initiiert wurde. Der Name, den die Gründer dem Rehabilitationszentrum für Kriegsverletzte in Lemberg gegeben haben, ist Superhumans. Dass regelmäßig österreichische Ärzte zur Mithilfe bei der Rehabilitation kommen, das ist einer der Wünsche der Organisatoren, sagt Botschafter Arad Benkö.
Es ist ja so, dass es viele, viele tausende Opfer des Beschusses durch Russland gibt. Dabei spielt das größte Thema Gliedmassen. Tausende von Menschen, Kinder, Frauen, ältere Menschen haben ihre Gliedmaßen verloren durch den Beschuss. Und sein Ziel, das Ziel des Honorarkonsuls in Odessa war es, ein Spital zu errichten, wo in geeigneter Weise diesen Menschen geholfen werden kann. In einer ersten Phase eben durch Prothesen und in einer zweiten durch Rehabilitation. Und dank privaten Financiers aus Großbritannien und den Vereinigten Staaten ist es gelungen, das bereits zu errichten. Es wurde vor wenigen Wochen eröffnet. Und es ist großes Interesse daran, auch, dass es eine österreichische Beteiligung gibt, zum Beispiel durch die Hospitierung von österreichischen Fachärzten, die dorthin für 2 Wochen kämen, um den ukrainischen Ärzten zu helfen, zu adaptieren und zu schauen, wie kann man das möglichst gut jenen helfen, die sich gerade in Rehabilitation befinden.
Für die Ukraine sind Partnerschaften lebenswichtig im Kampf gegen die Invasion und ihre Folgen. Auch Europa muss sich auf neue Realitäten einstellen. Ich bedanke mich bei allen Gesprächspartnern, die uns in Kiew zur Verfügung gestanden sind. Ich verabschiede mich von allen, die uns auf OKW folgen. Aktuelle Berichte aus der Ukraine und über die Ukraine gibt es regelmäßig im Falter. Ich empfehle ein Abonnement des Falter. Alle Informationen gibt es im Internet unter der Adresse abo.falter.at. Ursula Winterauer hat die Signation gestaltet, Philipp Dietrich betreut die Audiotechnik im Falter. Ich verabschiede mich, bis zur nächsten Sendung.
Sie hörten das Falterradio, den Podcast mit Raimund Löw.